introduction of the black spider suit, aka Venom, was earth-shattering. Literally, it happened in the comics on Battle World when the heroes and villains were all actively brawling, but even metaphorically speaking, Peter wearing the black suit was a cultural reset. It introduced Venom to the Marvel canon, and that character has now become wildly successful all on their own and bonded to so many other Marvel heroes. The introduction of Venom created this whole new world that is ever evolving and introducing new characters every single year. It also spawned the Venom movies that did so well the company that released them, Sony, decided to start their own Spider cinematic universe. So when you're sat in the theater watching Kraven the Hunter and wondering how he got here, you can blame Venom. Venom as a sim takes on the appearance of his host, like if he takes over a horse, he looks like a horse. But as my roommate kept pointing out while we were watching Venom 2018, and also anyone looking at photos of the OG Venom look from 1984's Secret Wars, his human look looks a lot like Spider-Man. And that's just cause he was introduced on Spider-Man. He imprinted on him. The look of Peter's OG spider suit inspired Venom, though Peter thought it was his subconscious thinking it was Spider-Woman 2's suit. Many of Venom's powers are also really close to Spider-Man's, again because that's where he got them. Venom learned to stick to walls and shoot webs while bonded with Peter, and just kept those traits when they separated because why would you give them up? Also, finally, the effect that Bully Maguire from Spider-Man 3 had, cultural reset in itself. In 9th place is Spider-Man and Deadpool. Spider-Man, when you put him next to all the other heroes, he's like the class clown. He's making the little quips and he's having fun. Put him next to Deadpool though, and suddenly Spider-Man is all business. Spider-Man and Deadpool, they quickly became a fan favorite friendship after they first fought in Cable and Deadpool 24. So popular that they had their own comic run from 2016 to 2019 with 51 issues. People liked their dynamic and the fact that Deadpool is trying his hardest to get under Spidey's skin and suit. It also helps that they visually look kind of similar with the red suits. They already look like a little team. Number 8 is that time Spider-Man briefly joined the X-Men and even taught at the school. After the demise of Wolverine, Spider-Man began teaching at the school even though he is not a mutant. The reason why was Wolverine needed Spider-Man to find a mole, and it would just be easier for him to find since he was an unbiased third party. Despite his underlying mission, Peter did his best and truly believed in his students. He helped them come into their own and develop their powers. But what I find so funny though about the whole like X-Men and Spider-Man thing is the argument is always, why are people so chill with heroes like Spider-Man but they hate mutants? And J. Jonah Jameson is like, actually, I'm gonna flip the script here. I love mutants and I absolutely despise Spider-Man. In his early days, Spider-Man was also asked to join the X-Men, but he wasn't looking for a team at the moment. In 7th place, we have the relationship between Peter Parker and Tony Stark in the MCU. This changed a lot about Peter Parker's character because he wasn't really poor anymore. This is actually a major complaint a lot of people have when it comes to Tom Holland's Spider-Man. He is supposed to struggle a bit. That was a big part of his character early on in the comics. It's also why a lot of people connected to him. This guy who gets knocked down by not just the villain of the day, but also his personal life, but keeps getting up, it's inspiring. He worked with what he had and he became the best hero he could be despite not having unlimited resources. That's obviously very different in the MCU, pre-No Way Home. Peter makes his first suit, but the others are all provided by Tony. Tony also acts as a mentor figure at times. Peter does still learn a lot of lessons on his own, but Tony did show him the ropes when it came to things like being in space. Or there's the iconic, if you're nothing without the suit, then you shouldn't have it. The representation of their relationship in the MCU is pretty different from the comics. I'm sorry to tell anyone who is exclusively a movie fan, but they don't always get along. I think Tony literally threw Peter across New York once. Tony's father figureness towards Peter also directly resulted in this next team up that eventually ruined Peter's life. So our 6th spot is for another MCU team up, one that taught Peter that you can't trust everyone no matter how nice they might seem. I am talking about that of Mysterio and Spider-Man from Spider-Man Far From Home. This team up altered Peter's brain chemistry. Literally, it unlocked his spider sense. Okay, not really. Peter already had it. But the scene of him fighting all the drones on the bridge was him really trusting himself for the first time. As much as I hate to see Peter hurting, that is a fundamental part of his character, and if he hadn't been betrayed by Mysterio, he wouldn't have learned who his real support system was, and they were a necessity for his next movie. No pain, no gain. Plus, the Mysterio team-up resulted in Peter's identity being revealed to the world, which ultimately led to Peter's life completely flipping on its head and then he lost everything. Alright, number 5 goes to Spider-Man and Spiderman, aka Miles Morales and Peter Parker. If you look at this through the lens of the Spider-Verse movies, Miles meeting Peter changed the course of his life on impact. There's literally a scene where you can see Miles' life trajectory change in a matter of seconds. The moment is when he's sitting in front of his Spider-Man and the colors around his head change from the Prowler green and purple to the Spider-Man blue and red. Then, you know, he was like set on a mission to save the multiverse, in which he met his lifelong friends and then later discovered he actually changed the Spider-Man canon, kind of, by becoming Spider-Man, and he was the first anomaly. So yeah, the game was changed with Miles Morales. Miles and Peter meeting in the comics was one of the things that alerted everyone to the impending incursions, and that also really changed the worlds. In spot 4, I have to put one of the Fantastic Four, I mean it is in the name, the Human Torch. This was one of Spider-Man's first ever official team-ups. It was the first of the Marvel team-up comic run from the 1970s. This friendly, co-worker, super relationship has stood the test of time and set Peter up with the skills to continue working with other heroes instead of just being a loner. Spider-Man even rejected a few teams at first because he thought it was his destiny to always work alone. Spider-Man actually tried joining the Fantastic Four right at the start of his journey, but it was because he was looking for a job because he realized he can't cash checks as Spider-Man, so he needed to join a super team with a salary. 1 against 4, he did destroy the team and portions of their lab, only to swing from the window upon finding out they don't in fact pay. 3 spiders for spot number 3. Was there anything more surprising than seeing 3 Spider-Man team up in Spider-Man No Way Home? Like, sure, everybody speculated that it was going to happen, but we were also all ready for it to not happen because the idea was so absurd. There was a high chance Marvel would never make this dream come true, but literally thank goodness that they did. I don't know about y'all, but I remember seeing that scene in theaters for the first time. The energy was unmatched and I've been chasing that high ever since. This scene changed the MCU for better. Well, that's up for debate, but it certainly changed it for good. The comics have been doing the multiverse thing for decades, but the MCU hadn't really touched it. There were glimpses of it. I am not here to erase Doctor Strange, that's a great movie, or the new Gamora from Endgame, but the idea of having multiple of the same person from different universes on screen at the same time fighting together, that was not something the MCU had done before. Spider-Man was the right hero for Marvel's first real dive into the multiverse, in my opinion. However, did the MCU get better after it started going all in with the multiverse after seeing the success of No Way Home? Some would argue no. No matter what though, you can't deny that the triple spider swing was a benchmark in the history of the MCU and nothing has been the same since. Our runner-up today, because I really wanted to mention it, is Tom Holland and Zendaya. Holland and Zendaya's team up for the Spider-Man movies changed the trajectory of their lives, not only launching both their careers even further, but also was a first step towards them literally finding their soulmate. Can you tell I'm excited about a Peter and MJ couple breaking the spider curse and getting engaged? I'm so happy for them. Number 1 is going to make some people mad, but Spider-Man's team up with Mephisto. I am in fact referencing the cursed moment when Peter gave up his marriage with MJ to save Aunt May. It literally changed everything. As much as we all hate the call, you can't deny that the world was not the same after those two made a deal. And I don't even mean just the 616 universe's history changing, but since this deal with the devil, things have changed in the way Marvel writers are allowed to tell Peter's story going forward. A Marvel editor went viral in 2024 for saying that if a writer wanted to make MJ and Peter a couple again, that's fine, they just can't get married. And that's the rule now, Peter can't get married.
Number 10. Frogman. Less of a team up, more of a put up with. Spider-Man and Frogman can be seen teaming up in the pages of Marvel Team Up Volume 1, Issue 131. The two reluctantly join forces to take down the White Rabbit. Most of this team up involves Spider-Man trying to get Frogman to stay out of trouble and out of his way. Frogman is actually Eugene, the son of former villain Leapfrog. In fact, Eugene even reuses his dad's costume. He and Spider-Man do end up stopping White Rabbit with the help of his dad, who Eugene thought was working for her but who is secretly working undercover for the cops. Aw yeah. In the end, the reward money for her capture gets split up and everything ends up happily ever after for everybody. Eugene even gets to feel like a bona fide hero. Aww. Number 9. Red Sonja. Typical Peter has to cancel a date with MJ when the Daily Bugle needs staff to cover the pandemonium ensuing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But she sneakily tags along. And when Parker transforms into Spider-Man and gets stuck in a scuffle, a sword calls out to MJ and transforms her into Red Sonja. Akin to what happened to MJ, another soul has been possessed by the evil dark wizard Kulan Ga, and the two must team up to defeat him. Fortunately, they do, and Red Sonja stops possessing MJ, who faints into Spidey's arms. Gosh, do I love this MJ/Red Sonja mashup. I feel like I need to add Red Sonja to my cosplay list. Number 8. Venom. Spider-Man and one of top arch nemesis, Venom, have teamed up on more than one occasion throughout their history. But when I think of Venom and Spider-Man working side by side, I always think of Carnage. Another point that makes this team up so next level crazy. Carnage is a favorite among the symbiote fans, an offspring of the Venom symbiote that attaches itself to famed serial killer Cletus Cassidy. And you can find this showdown in the Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1 from issues 361 to 363, titled Carnage, Part 1, 2, and 3 respectively. The other thing I love about this team up is that it involves the Human Torch, and later the entire Fantastic Four team, who are called upon to help control Venom. Oh, and also when Spider-Man and the Human Torch go to recruit Eddie Brock to help them stop Carnage, Venom almost drowns Johnny Storm. It is for this reason, if you're going to read only one of the 3-part story, I recommend issue 362. Did I also mention that this team up also appears in the 1994 Spider-Man animated series, where the two reluctantly join forces to take down Carnage and Baron Mordo and stop Dormammu. Number 7. Man-Wolf and Frankenstein. For those of you who don't know who Man-Wolf is, he's like a werewolf from outer space. Yeah, that's right. He also just happens to be former astronaut John Jameson, son of Jonah Jameson. In Marvel Team Up Volume 1 issue 37, we see Spider-Man coming together with Man-Wolf and Frankenstein to escape the clutches of an evil mad scientist, the Monster Maker, and stop his dastardly plot. This story is a fun one, especially if you are a classic monster movie fan like myself. Number 6. Wolverine. For this team up, there are a few different places we could take you, but I'd like to take you to a short comic series called Astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine. In this little 6-issue series, we get to see these two very different superheroes team up after just getting caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The two showed up to stop a bank robbery, only to have some time-traveling diamonds blast them millions of years back to the past. It's cute, entertaining, well drawn, and well colored. And if you don't believe me, I highly recommend checking it out for yourself. One of the things I love most about this team up is how well Wolverine and Spider-Man both clash and complement one another, and the interlacing of both darkly serious and light comedic writing. Number 5. Spider-Man and Spider-Man and Spider-Man. You know, I can't do a Spider-Man list without touching on the Spider-Verse, and more specifically, the film Into the Spider-Verse. One of my favorite storylines within this Spider-Man comic, Spider-Geddon, involves the exploration of alternate Spider-Mans. I love how much this storyline has come to embrace the idea of multiple spider people, or spider totems as they are often referred. All of these team-ups are linked by the idea that there are an unlimited number of universes, all connected by spider totems, different versions of Spider-Man, who are stationed in their own universe and are responsible for protecting it. Great threats to the multiverse, however, often require our alternates to take part in mass level team-ups in the comics. If you are more a fan of the Marvel Cinematic world, you will perhaps be more experienced with the very loose adaptation of the Spider-Verse storyline, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was released in 2018, and experienced much critical and financial success. And if you aren't familiar with this film, like, you need to be. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. Number 4. Deadpool. On the opposite team-up side of Wolverine, we have Deadpool, who has a similar writing style to Spider-Man, though much more of his material could be considered more adult or crude. Not only have these two teamed up multiple times, and both have been Avengers, but they also have their own entire series together. And it's hilarious, as you may have already predicted. Spider-Man/Deadpool tells the story of Deadpool seeking out Spider-Man's help and confessing that Spider-Man has always been a role model. Cute. Eventually, Wade wins Spider-Man over despite the fact that Spider-Man does seem to often get annoyed by Deadpool's antics. The two take down all sorts of villains, including the first semi-big bad, Patient Zero, and complete all kinds of heroic acts together, including, but not limited to, saving Christmas. Number 3. Cast of SNL. I could explain this comic in full to you all, but I kind of feel like it would ruin it. This team-up comes to us from the Marvel Team-Up series Volume 1, issue 74. In that issue, you can see the cast of SNL, as hosted by none other than Stan Lee, team up with Spider-Man to fight some samurai. Yep, it is the epitome of everything that is super 70s in the comics, neatly wrapped up in one issue. The only thing that makes me sad about this team-up is that we didn't get more of it. Number 2. Mysterio. In the newest Spider-Man film Far From Home, we will be seeing Mysterio team up with Spider-Man. And if the trailers are to be believed, we will also see Mysterio be welcomed into the Avengers. This isn't the first time villain and hero have teamed up. We also see the two team up to defeat Doc Ock in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, issue 686. Mysterio is probably one of the most iconic Spider-Man villains, an illusionist and trickster who often cannot be trusted. Okay, so there are two ways this team up could end in Far From Home. Number 1, Mysterio is retconned as a superhero in the film who maybe later turns villain, but not yet. Or number 2, Mysterio is teaming up with Spider-Man simply to betray him. While Mysterio's motives are yet unclear, it is almost certainly guaranteed that Far From Home will at least allow us to see these two fight side by side at some point, granting us at least a small amount of team-up time for these two heroes. Number 1, Superman. Okay, so yes, while this DC and Marvel crossover is titled Superman vs. The Amazing Spider-Man, by the end of the comic the two are on the same page. And I had to include it because, like most of us, I do enjoy a good DC Marvel crossover every now and then. This one-off involves Lex Luthor and Doc Ock teaming up to pit the two heroes against each other, though in the end Spider-Man and Superman join forces to save their lady loves, Lois Lane and MJ, who have been kidnapped by the villains. And of course, they prevail, save the day, and end up as buds.
At number 10 we have Valkyrie. This is one of the more understandable team-ups on the list, considering both Thor and Valkyrie are known to be loyal to the same cause. Speaking of course about the prosperity of Asgard and the protection of the 9 realms. In one particular instance, during the Ragnarok event, Valkyrie and Thor team up in an effort to save Asgard from total destruction at the hands of Hela, and they even take on Thanos at one point. Although they are ultimately unsuccessful and Asgard is destroyed, this is no doubt an epic union between these two heroes. And we can expect them to come together again down the line, knowing that they have a deep respect for each other and very similar stakes on the table. At number 9 we have Hercules. Thor and Herc come together a few different times, both as allies and as enemies, but of course we'll be focusing on their team-ups for this list. At one point, Hercules finds himself under the control of the Greek god Pluto, having been tricked into ruling the Netherworld after signing a film contract. Undoubtedly a bizarre situation to find himself in, but nonetheless, he gets help from Thor, who had previously been more of an adversary to Herc. In fact, before the actual team-up that this entry is about, Hercules and Thor fight a few more times, accidentally, which is really weird because it starts to paint Hercules as this very confused and possibly, insecure character who doesn't seem to know what he really wants. Finally, they do end up teaming together and they team up to take down the Wrecking Crew. Later, Herc becomes an ally to the Avengers, which makes for a few more team-ups with the God of Thunder, most notably during the Operation Galactic Storm storyline. At number 8, we have Thor's team-up with Iron Man. Although this pair tend to be known to butt heads from time to time, there have been a number of cases of them fighting alongside one another. Of course they have, they're both part of the same very famous superhero team, the Avengers, but I'm not referring to their time on the Avengers, I'm looking at the times when the two heroes go off on their own. One of these times is during the God Complex storyline as part of their 2010 mini-series of comics called Iron Man / Thor, fittingly. And the threat they're up against isn't a joke either. They're trying to stop the High Evolutionary from creating a modern god from nothing, using Iron Man as the vessel. So it's good that Tony Stark has Thor on his side for this one, because dealing with gods and mysticism isn't always the easiest to do on your own if you're immortal, no matter how much money and tech you have. At number 7 is none other than Captain America. Aside from the obvious reason to team up, Thor and Captain America have a pretty healthy relationship going, just the two of them. Possibly the most notable instance of the two teaming up is during the Avengers Prime miniseries when they go to Hell and fight Hela, Thor's sister. Although Iron Man is there as well, Thor and Tony Stark aren't really getting along during this issue, and it more so outlines the relationship between Thor and Cap, both on and off the battlefield. And this is a pretty notable team up as well, given the stakes and the villain they're facing. Hela is one of the most powerful threats out there, and Hell is her domain naturally, so having Captain America there is really important, because if Thor was just accompanied by Iron Man, given their frustrations, it may not have been a successful mission for either of them. They do end up succeeding, and yes, Thor and Iron Man do come back together as friends. But it takes a pretty harrowing battle in the underworld to make that happen, and Captain America's leadership is essential to their success. At number 6, we have the Hulk. In Thor Ragnarok, Thor and the Hulk come together as a team in an unusual occurrence when they face off against Loki, and they make a surprisingly fitting duo, both having been banished from their homeworlds and forced to face off in this strange gladiatorial arena. At this point in the story, Thor is banished from Asgard and without his hammer, and Hulk finds himself lost on a distant planet, banished from Earth. At this point, he's being used as nothing more than a subject for this planet's violent arena matches, and he even gets pitted against Thor before they eventually decide to team up. So when they do decide to defy their captors and fly back to where they came from, there's more than their combined strength that drives them forward. A bond based on their own experiences with abandonment and desperation leads them to an epic win over Loki by the end of the movie. At number 5 is Thor's epic team up with Rocket and Groot. This alliance makes for a really powerful combo because when they come together, they actually manage to fend off Thanos, one of the greatest threats in all of the cosmos. When Wakanda is invaded by Thanos, T'Challa is forced to turn to external aid to keep his world from being taken over by Thanos. And the unlikely pairing of Thor, Rocket, and Groot come in to fend off the Horde. You may call it luck that allows the outcome from this battle to end well for the good guys, but I'd say it's something about this union of heroes that makes their effectiveness work so well. Maybe it was something about the fact that Thor had just been beaten down till near death by Thanos before he met up with the Guardians of the Galaxy, or maybe their powers just happened to synergize perfectly with one another. Either way, we are left with what has become one of the most epic lines in all of Infinity War. Bring me Thanos. I'm not gonna do it justice, you just gotta look it up. At number 4 is Beta Ray Bill. Thor and Beta Ray Bill have come together on numerous occasions, them being very close friends and allies on and off the battlefield. And whenever they do pair up as a team, their bond really gives them that edge that makes them thrive. Now, is it their bond or is it the fact that they're both wielding Asgardian hammers made from Uru? It might be both. Let's just say it's both. Team-ups between these two usually involve some kind of high-stakes predicament that Asgard finds itself in. For instance, one of the more recent team-ups they've had was the second coming of Ragnarok and the defeat of the Fenris Wolf. Thor eventually sends Bill away to continue his work alone, but there's no doubt that soon enough they come back together to kick some ass for the glory of Asgard. Also, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there are theories suggesting that Beta Ray Bill might make an appearance in the new Thor Love and Thunder movie coming out in July. If you know about that one frame going around online with what looks like a missing character, then you may know what I mean. But that's still speculation, so we'll see. Alright, at number 3 is Galactus. This is a really unexpected team up that happens in Thor number 168 and 169 when Galactus actually finds himself in danger at the hands of the Black Winter. So in response to this, Galactus decides to grant Thor a boost of power to become his herald. With this newfound ally, Galactus is able to use Thor's help to take down the Black Winter, as harrowing of a task as it is. This is such a crazy team up, which is why I put it higher on the list. A being as great as Galactus doesn't often find himself in danger, nor does he find himself needing an ally to fight off a formidable threat. But in this instance it happens, and it becomes one of the most unique and powerful Thor team-ups we've ever seen. Thor doesn't really stay loyal to Galactus though, which is a good move because we all know that Galactus wasn't about to turn good after the job was finished. So Thor ends up stealing the entire power cosmic, supercharging himself into one of the most powerful versions of him that we've ever seen. He then uses this power to take down both Galactus and the Black Winter, one of his most impressive feats to date. At number 2 is Jane Foster. I mean, do I have to explain why this one gets put at number 2? This team up gains a huge boost in points due to the iconic and romantic factor. These two have had an on-again, off-again relationship that has brought Jane into positions of power on Asgard and then back into average life on Earth. But in one epic return to form in Avengers number 56, Jane begins to recognize that her humble marriage to Thor might not be as it seems. And when she's proven right, Mephisto is revealed to have been behind an elaborate ruse the whole time. This triggers a Thor from somewhere in the multiverse to come and support Jane Foster in her battle against Mephisto, who appears in the form of 3 pigs. And yes, I know that Jane is known as Valkyrie during this fight, and basically ever since her first run as Thor, but these mantles get thrown around so much that I wanted to explore the only constant, which in this case is Jane Foster. and this isn't the last time these two have or will team up. Whoever's seen the new Thor Love and Thunder trailer knows that she is also going to be making quite the appearance in the new movie coming out in July. Romantic team-ups should always rank high on these lists. Power levels aren't the only thing to consider when two heroes come together. At number 1 is of course Thor's epic and somewhat rare team-up with his brother Loki. Actually, maybe this does happen a few times, but it's mainly because of Thor's tolerance and love for his brother more than anything. Loki still typically makes decisions only if they serve him, but I digress. One of these team-ups happens in one of the earlier comics when Loki decides he'd prefer to have his father Odin rule over Asgard instead of Surtur, so he teams up with Thor to repel the demon's advances. And another time is of course in Thor the Dark World when Loki and Thor come together once more with the common motive to take revenge on their mother's killer. And then once again, so yeah, it happens a lot, once again they face off against Hela in Ragnarok. But the most notable team up, if we can call it that, is when Loki sacrifices himself to protect Thor from the Mad Titan. As we all know, these team-ups all get so much more respect based on the typical relationship between these two siblings, which is rocky to say the least. So when they do come together, it's often very dramatic and even a bit emotional. And that's what epic team-ups are all about, right? The context behind why and how a pair of superpowered beings decide to support each other in battle.
Number 10. Spiderman and SNL. In Marvel team-up number 74, Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson went to watch a taping of Saturday Night Live. John Belushi is playing his samurai character and ends up getting his hands on Silver Samurai's ring. When Silver Samurai comes to get his ring, Spidey has to help John Belushi and the other not ready for primetime players battle against Silver Samurai and his crew. The SNL cast puts up a pretty good fight, dressed as heroes like Miss Marvel and Thor, and eventually the day is saved. This actually would have been a pretty amazing sketch, especially since that cast was one of the best SNL casts ever. Number 9. Batman and Sherlock Holmes. This one actually made quite a bit of sense. Two of the world's greatest detectives working together in one mysterious comic. When a descendant of the infamous Moriarty starts causing trouble, Batman turns to none other than Sherlock Holmes for help. But the unlikely thing is that this actually took place in modern day while Holmes was alive in the 1800s. But it's okay because they had a super plausible explanation for his long life. A distillation of royal jelly from bees and the rarefied atmosphere of Tibet. Sounds legit. Number 8. Batman and Spider-Man. So this is one of the more likely on this list since at least both characters are superheroes, but it's still a pretty weird combination. Not only are they from different universes, with Batman being DC and Spider-Man being Marvel, but they have totally different personalities. Batman is the stoic, silent defender of the night, while Spider-Man is the wisecracking young kid who loves to make dumb jokes. In the same issue, we saw Joker and Carnage getting along splendidly, which I suppose isn't much of a surprise. A lot of people didn't like this, but I thought the Abbott and Costello relationship that Bats and Spidey had was pretty funny. Number 7. Superman and the Quick Bunny. Okay, this one was just the worst. While this may seem like just some clever ad for Nesquik, it was actually a freaking terrible ad for Nesquik. Seriously, they managed to ruin Superman and Nesquik in one short comic. Superman faces up against Weather Wizard and for some reason can't handle it alone and needs help from the little bunny. Then they have a chocolate milk drinking contest and Superman can't even win that. The only good thing about this comic is it reminded me of all those awesome Nesquik commercials from the 90s. Remember when he threw his cue into the pool and it turned to chocolate? Those were the days. Number 6. Superman and Bugs Bunny. Yep, turns out Soups has a thing for rabbits. In this 4-part series, we saw a bunch of heroes working alongside Looney Tunes characters. After Mixie's Pitlick and Yo-Yo the Dodo brought the two worlds together. To make matters worse, and at the same time way better, the characters had their personalities mixed up too. Seeing the Flash and Roadrunner running their butts off and Daffy Duck acting like Batman, so basically Darkwing Duck, was just amazing. Number 5. Archie and the Punisher. In one issue of Archie, the Punisher came to town hunting a criminal who looked much like Archie. But then the Punisher meets Archie and realizes that he's straight up the most wholesome person ever and doesn't harm him. This was actually a pretty decent one since it took place in Archie comics. The absurd and lighthearted atmosphere that generally comes from these crossovers worked pretty well. Number 4. Batman and the Ninja Turtles. In the 6-issue series Batman / Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we see, well, Batman meeting the Ninja Turtles. The Turtles and Shredder find themselves transported to Gotham City, coming across Batman and a number of villains as they try to find their way back home. They have pretty weird chemistry, kinda like Batman and Spider-Man, but 4 of them. And Batman even chastises Michelangelo for chewing with his mouth open. As good as Splinter is at teaching martial arts, he clearly slacked on teaching them manners. I think it's time for Bruce to pick up 4 new wards. Number 3, the Sonic Gang and a bunch of inappropriate image characters. In Archie Adventure Series number 7, Sonic Super Special, we saw the Sonic Gang team up with a cast of characters from Image Comics. This was super weird, but pretty cool, seeing the Sonic characters battling it up with some pretty cool Image characters like Shadowhawk and Savage Dragon. It wasn't the most fitting combination because the Image characters are a little more adult than the Sonic ones, but the worst part is that Spawn was barely in it. Even though he was on the cover and is probably Image Comics' most famous character, he was just in one panel saying no, and then bailing. It's like Image Comics could only afford him for one quick cameo scene, but like Spawn isn't some famous actor who's super busy. You can draw him all you want. They didn't even include him in the final fight. So lame, and it had such potential. Number 2, X-Men and Star Trek. This was another of the comics that as a comic was pretty mediocre, but the fact that it was Star Trek and X-Men all in one comic made it just amazing. Now, I know what you're thinking. This must have been done because Patrick Stewart was in both X-Men and Star Trek. Well, sadly this comic was released in 1996. 4 years before Stewart played Professor X on screen. So they missed what would have been a pretty hilarious opportunity. The comic did still have its moments though, my favorite being when Spock knocks out Wolverine with a Vulcan nerve pinch. Yeah, give it a read if you're a fan of the 2 franchises, just don't expect literary gold. Number 1, The Punisher and Eminem. In a one-off Punisher comic in 2009, we saw Eminem added to the mix, at first fighting against the Punisher until he realizes that Castle had come to protect him. Because apparently Barracuda, another artist with whom Eminem grew up, was hired by the frickin' Parents Music Council to kill Eminem. Yeah, that's the trick. This guy's promoting violence to our kids, so we're gonna kill him. Honestly, the comic itself was pretty awful. Eminem's animation stuck out like a sore thumb for some reason, and somehow he managed to pistol whip Punisher and knock him out. But it was still pretty epic to see Eminem and the Punisher in a comic together. Yeah, was this done mostly to hype up his new album? Definitely. Does that make it less amazing? Not even a little.
Number 10, Mockingbird. In this story from 1980, Spider-Man heads off to Los Angeles and has a run-in with Mockingbird, as well as Nick Fury. This issue fleshes out a lot of the world of S.H.I.E.L.D. and features some stuff that comes up in the movie Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This is far from the weirdest choice on the list, but still has a lot of really weird moments, like Spider-Man pulling a guy from a flying car and tossing him to the street 20 feet below. It's a pretty fun issue, with a lot of great moments with the aforementioned flying car, and Mockingbird kicking some real butt with her battle staves. It's S.H.I.E.L.D. versus Mockingbird, with Spider-Man sort of caught in the middle. He doesn't even like being in LA. Thankfully, things work out for Mockingbird in the end, and she survives getting totally blasted by S.H.I.E.L.D. She actually has quite a career with Marvel, getting her own comic series in 2016, and was even voted number 48 out of 50 in IGN's top 50 Avengers. She like barely made the list, just like this list. Number 9, Ghost Rider. Now these two definitely make for an unusual pairing. I feel like Ghost Rider with his penance stare is pretty much the furthest possible thing from the tongue-lashing Spidey dishes out with the endless quips and puns. In this story, called If an Eye Offend Thee, our dynamic duo goes up against Orb, a mysterious villain with a giant eyeball for a head. Peter Parker and MJ see a billboard advertising Ghost Rider's latest stunt show and decide to come and watch, blow off some steam, you know? Pete is really impressed by Ghost Rider's makeup, not suspecting he's actually possessed by a demon. During the show, Orb shows up and entrances the guards and the crowd just by looking at them with his giant eyeball, then attempts to kidnap Ghost Rider's girlfriend Roxanne. Ghost Rider is unable to catch Orb as he uses his hypnosis to make audience members walk in front of the Ghost Rider, causing him to wipe out on his cycle. In the stunning conclusion, they leap out of the way of a train, Ghost Rider and Spider-Man, but Orb is not so lucky and totally gets hit. However, when they search the scene afterwards, they fail to locate Orb's body. Finally, Spider-Man swings off into the night, a bit disturbed by Ghost Rider's comment that he's not wearing a mask or makeup. Number 8, The Werewolf by Night. In this issue, Spidey is on the move again, this time to San Francisco on an assignment for the Daily Bugle. Exploring the Golden Gate Bridge, he barely reacts in time when the werewolf leaps out from a hiding place and attacks. Spidey stops the both of them from falling to their deaths with a quick bit of webbing action, and then tosses Werewolf off of the bridge into the water. The end. I'm just kidding. Werewolf does appear again later, but during the encounter, the sun rises and Peter witnesses him changing back into his human form, Jack Russell. Spidey decides to help Jack, and before long, he's confronting Moondark in a theater, taking him down and helping the werewolf to return to normal, no longer under Moondark's influence. Spidey does a lot of monologuing in this issue, recounting the recent death of Gwen Stacy and other recent events in his run. Also neat fact, Spidey's adventures in San Francisco continue along in the next Daredevil, issue 103, where those two meet up and team up against Ramrod. Black Widow is actually in that episode too. Team ups! Number 7. Red Sonja. Spider-Man and Red Sonja actually had an exciting romantically charged adventure recently across 5 issues in 2007, but I'm talking about their first encounter in Marvel Team-Up number 79 from 1979 called Sword of the She-Devil. Red Sonja first appeared as a character in Conan the Barbarian, but she went on to have her very own popular series and even a movie in the 80s. In this epic issue, we see worlds collide as Mary Jane transforms into Red Sonja. Red Sonja fights along Spider-Man against an evil sorcerer. The writers cleverly use a museum and some ancient artifacts to connect Sonja's world to the modern day New York home of Spider-Man. It's pretty epic seeing the combination of fantasy monsters and swords mixed with the classic Spider-Man quipping and web slinging. I'm sure fans who liked both comics at the time really enjoyed this crossover. In the end, Red Sonja transforms back into MJ on page 19, revealing that she was only possessed. It's one of the few examples where possession isn't necessarily a bad thing. Spidey would have had a hard time taking on this foe by himself. Number 6. Frankenstein's Monster. This issue was definitely an attempt to boost sales and create more support for Marvel's Frankenstein character, whose run started in 1973. During this story, Frankenstein recaps his origin from Frankenstein issue number 1, and he talks a bit about his battles against Dracula in issues 7 through 11. So basically, in the issue, Spider-Man gets blasted with a ray beam while he's trying to stop a robbery and inexplicably wakes up on a table next to Frankenstein. They escape from this castle and find themselves in the mountains, and later rescue Judith Klemmer, an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., on an assignment to stop the monster maker Von Schucht, who plans to rule the world with an army of monsters. Classic. Spidey and Judith sneak in the back of his castle while Frankenstein just busts in the front door, beating the crap out of anybody who opposes him. When Frankenstein finally walks into the main chamber, he sees the monster maker releasing another prisoner against Spidey and Judith, the Man-Wolf. The story is continued in issue number 37, but I'll leave that for you to discover on your own. Number 5. Dr. Doom. I know, right? How could Spidey possibly end up on the same side as the nefarious Victor Von Doom? We actually also see Vision and Scarlet Witch in this crazy crossover. A mystical being called the Dark Rider is attempting to steal Dr. Doom's magical energies, but Spider-Man and Vision attack him together. He uses his powers to make a cat grow to a humongous size, and the heroes are kept busy battling it until Scarlet Witch hits it with a hex bolt, returning the cat to its normal size. Unfortunately, all this magic usage only strengthens the Dark Rider's power, and as Spider-Man and Vision watch on, Scarlet Witch realizes they'll have to help Dr. Doom in order to stop their common foe. They have an epic showdown, and Scarlet Witch stuns the Rider, but then he breaks free and incapacitates Doom and the Witch, leaving none to stand in his way. In the next issue, Marvel Team-Up number 44, there's a stunning conclusion where Moondragon also joins the party. It's a whole crazy host of heroes. These team-ups are a lot of fun, and they were also a great marketing tool for Marvel back in the day. Number 4. Howard the Duck. A lot of these entries are from the Marvel Team-Up series, but this next one is actually from 1996 during the Clone Saga event when Marvel had a run of Spider-Man team-ups. In this comic, we're actually treated to 2 fantastic team-ups, the first being Spider-Man and Gambit, but it's actually Spider-Man alongside Howard the Duck that I found really strange. This story crosses over with a Savage Dragon Destroyer Duck story that was in publication by Image Comics at the time. Peter Parker can hardly believe it when he overhears some bystanders say a recent robbery was committed by 2 men dressed as turtles in spacesuits. but it's really happening in this crazy crossover that incorporates the world of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Funny enough, there is actually still debate surrounding whether or not the version of Howard the Duck from this comic is canon, with some people arguing that this version of Howard is a clone and actually exists separately from the Image Comics universe. Man, it's clone saga, am I right? Number 3, not ready for primetime players. In this absolutely unexpected team up, Peter and Mary Jane happen to somehow have tickets to Saturday Night Live. A mysterious, powerful ring was given to a member of the cast, and the Silver Samurai has come to infiltrate the show and try to steal the ring back. We get to see John Belushi, Dan Aykroyd, and even Lorne Michaels as things unfold backstage in the dressing rooms, and Stan Lee is the host of SNL tonight performing the opening monologue. Sounds like an episode of SNL I would actually want to watch. After a ton of wacky antics and drama, the samurai obtains his ring and disappears back to his own time, presumably. Luckily, the audience has no idea and thinks it was all part of the show. It turns out in the end that the ring was mailed to Belushi by mistake. It's honestly just one trope piled on top of another with a whole bunch of guest stars. So while it's not the most compelling story, it certainly makes for a very memorable comic book moment. Number 2, Aunt May and Franklin Richards. This crazy issue sees Spidey totally take the backseat while we go on a crazy escapade with Aunt May, the new Herald of Galactus. This issue opens with the death of Nova, and we see Galactus mourn the loss and contemplate what to do. He heads to Earth, hoping to ask Reed Richards for some help, but instead finds Franklin Richards at the circus with Peter and his Aunt May. He decides he's going to take Franklin to be his new herald, but Franklin uses his power to transfer the transformation energy from Galactus over to May Parker, transforming her into Golden Oldie, the Herald of Galactus. She's practically a sentient Twinkie in this paper-thin advertisement, but it still has a lot of heart. She collects all of the Twinkies on Earth to satiate Galactus, but it simply isn't enough, and eventually she finds an entire Twinkie planet, which Galactus promptly devours. Then May comes on back to Earth, and Pete wakes up at the end discovering it was all a dream. Then another person wakes up seeing that that was just a dream, and there's a few panels of that. It's a pretty funny ending to the whole comic. Number 1, Spider-Man and Ren and Stimpy. No doubt one of the weirdest crossovers I've seen, but it was still a fun one. It's Ren and Stimpy number 6, where Spider-Man shows up. He definitely gave them a boost because their run went on for 44 issues altogether. If you didn't know, Ren and Stimpy was a popular Nickelodeon show from the 90s that also had a Marvel Comics series. Spidey steps in to replace Powdered Toast Man, the beloved mascot of our duo's favorite breakfast cereal. Spidey reveals that he's just stepping in to temporarily fill the job, as Toastman is currently being mind controlled by the evil Donut. The whole thing is full to the brim with puns and stuff. Toastman hurling razor sharp bread like batarangs and being called a serial offender. Donut even has to boost his testosterone at one point to help take on Spider-Man. The whole thing is weird, it's wacky, and it's definitely worth checking out.
At number 10, we have Batman and Sherlock Holmes. This is the one that probably makes the most sense on this list, believe it or not, because the original Batman has always been a detective above everything, with his original comics actually being called Detective Comics. This adventure is actually number 572 of that comic series, and the pairing somehow just seems weirdly right. The only thing is that the Sherlock Holmes stories typically take place in the 1800s, well before Batman's time. So the way they make this work is by just simply having Sherlock be super duper old, over 100 years old actually. It works well enough, I guess. The plot is basically that Batman is facing a challenge trying to take down Moriarty and takes Sherlock's help to solve the issue. This is back in the day when Batman was still pretty peppy and fun, bringing Robin along for the ride and everything, so the pair-up kind of works in tone as well. It's a fun little moment in time that brings one of the most influential detectives of one era and pairs him up with one of the most influential detectives of this era. All this considered though, it's still weird, and I needed to put it on the list. At number 9, we have X-Men vs. Star Trek. This is a very weird pairing because Marvel could have easily paired up Star Trek with another team that's more synonymous with space travel, like, you know, the Guardians of the Galaxy. But on the other hand, the X-Men do always show an interest in teaming up with and supporting humans, and they sometimes do go into space, so it sort of works. Relatively speaking, that is, in comparison to what else you'll see on this list later. But all in all, this team up is pretty fun, showing off some fun traits of both teams, like Spock using the Vulcan pinch on Wolverine before they become friendly with one another. But the fun and games subside when the teams are tasked with taking on the threat of the mutant Proteus. This team up actually worked well enough when it was released that they even got a few sequels, so there's that. At number 8 we have Batman and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yes, this team up actually happened. When Shredder comes to Gotham and teams up with Ra's al Ghul and they try and, you know, take over the world together, Batman naturally enters the picture. But so do the 4 Ninja Turtles. The contrast between this darker, more modern Batman and the very fun but very annoying Ninja Turtles makes for a funny combination that is known to actually be pretty good, all things considered. And something about this team up actually does feel right for some reason. Maybe it's the setting of Gotham seeming like it fits for the Turtles, and maybe also something about the dynamic of these characters. Batman does seem like the perfect straight man to the silliness of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Regardless, it is weird, but fun, but weird, but fun, and needed a spot on the list. At number 7 is Superman and the Nesquik Bunny. So as we go deeper into the list, things are getting a little weirder, yes. This one strikes me as bizarre for sure, but also somewhat fitting considering cereal companies love to pair characters from pop culture with their brands. But still, that's the only slack I'm gonna cut it. It's sort of weird that there is an actual comic book about it because it sort of messes with the canon of Superman. But alas, it happened, and it was bananas. Basically just a really long ad for cereal and a pretty weak plot. The villain in this one is Weather Wizard, and somehow Superman has genuine trouble taking him down. So who does he call? A group of young children and a rabbit. And even after their victory, there's a chocolate milk chugging challenge that Superman somehow even loses to the bunny. It's just a bizarre journey of sellouts and awkward writing, but I live for things like this that shouldn't exist but do. It just makes things more fun. At number 6 there's Batman and Scooby-Doo. Another strangely fitting pairing. This comic made me realize just how many detective characters there actually are out there, and why they keep insisting on teaming up with one another. In this team up, the villain is Man-Bat, which is actually a great choice because he's one of the few Batman villains that's actually a monster, which fits with the Scooby-Doo brand. But this weird match actually isn't the last time people see the Scooby-Doo franchise work its way into the comic book world. Later on, Scooby-Doo will eventually become a sidekick to Ace the Bat Hound and continue to solve crimes alongside him. Although I'll be honest, I haven't checked out how those issues looked. Couldn't imagine them being able to fit in anything too dark with Scooby-Doo around, you know? They should never have to know the violence that takes place on the streets of Gotham. At number 5 is a weird one for sure. The Avengers actually team up with the Guardians of the Galaxy to face off against Titans from the Attack on Titan universe. This issue is called Attack on Avengers, naturally, and it's a super short 8 pages long. Basically, the plot is that the Titans just show up in New York City and start causing problems. Problems like eating people, you know? What I find strange about this, aside from the obvious, is that the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy pair up in the first place. I feel like it's already a complicated enough concept to have the Avengers versus Attack on Titan, but then they just go and complicate it even further, which is just strange. It doesn't get in the way of it, it's just weird. It's known to be a pretty fun read though. It doesn't go deep into any complex plot or anything. It just sort of has the heroes show off their abilities one after the other to take down the Titans. It's unclear who wins the battle though, with the issue just kind of ending with the Guardians of the Galaxy tapping in to do some Titan killing of their own. At number 4 we have a personal favorite of mine, the Punisher teaming up with Eminem. When I found out this team up took place, I was so happy. It's just such a good fit given their darker personalities, and makes me like Eminem more that he'd even go for something like this. This comic came out back in 2009, the same year that Eminem released his Relapse album, just for context for all you Eminem fans out there. The plot is pretty simple, with Barracuda being the villain in the comic that the two team up to take down. The strange part of this issue, other than the part where Eminem and the Punisher are teaming up, is a decision which I think was a bit of a misstep, and it's that Eminem is totally OP. He beats up the Punisher before they even team up for one, which I guess gives Eminem a pretty impressive power stat canonically, and then when they're kidnapped by Barracuda and taken to the Arctic to be killed, Eminem breaks free and saves the Punisher, killing Barracuda with a chainsaw in the process, which sort of weakens the integrity of the Punisher just to boost Eminem. I feel like they could have easily played with Eminem's funny personality a little more and had the two characters play off each other to give us a more humble and dynamic story. But maybe Eminem just said yes to this gig so he could look cool, and somehow even more badass than the Punisher. At number 3 we have Superman teaming up with Bugs Bunny. You heard me correctly. This team up could also just as easily be considered a DC Comics and Looney Tunes crossover, but out of all the different characters from both franchises, Bugs and Superman are two of the more significant characters who end up associating with one another, which is just a bonkers duo to have teamed up in the first place. The way that these worlds collide is that Mixie-Yezpitlik and Yo-Yo the Dodo basically just manipulate reality to make the pair up happen for fun, which I guess is the only real way to justify something as weird as this. They don't really do much as a pair, but you can imagine that Bugs just kind of wanders around and quips while Superman tries to figure out how to get him to focus. There's more to it than that, I'm sure, but honestly you'd have to pay me to actually read all the way through this thing. No offense if this is a favorite of yours, I don't know. I saw the cover and I couldn't do it. At number 2 is kind of a part 2 to number 3, if that sentence made any sense. It's Batman and Elmer Fudd. This is just the most bizarre team up, again, with the very loose through line that they're both sort of detectives. Elmer is a hunter, but he's usually like creeping around looking for Bugs Bunny clues and stuff. Either way, this issue is actually known to be strangely good and suspenseful, considering what it is. It has Elmer Fudd partaking in a dark noir storyline on the hunt for a mysterious killer known as the Bunny. But things keep getting more complicated for Fudd when Batman turns out to be the real culprit. Believe it or not, this is a different storyline from the previous entry, which just makes me wonder how the hell Looney Tunes and DC Comics kept thinking it would be a smart idea to give their characters crossovers. Although, it seemingly worked for people. People seem to like this one with Elmer Fudd, so maybe they were onto something? At number 1 is a very, very strange one. Batman and the Beatles, or the copyright-free version of the Beatles anyway. This one doesn't seem to have any common thread to tie these two pop culture worlds together. I really tried to think of one, but I just couldn't. Maybe the writer was just a big Beatles fan and wanted an excuse to get in touch with Paul McCartney's people if he needed to. Maybe they were safe from copyright, because they don't really look like them. I mean, to be fair, the plot of the comic is about as clever as it could have been given the pairing. Batman is basically trying to investigate whether or not Paul of the Beatles is actually dead. For those of you who don't know, there was a fan-generated rumor years ago floating around about the idea that Paul had actually died and was secretly replaced by a guy named William Campbell. So this ridiculous theory is what Batman is trying to get to the bottom of. And what ends up happening, spoiler alert, is that Batman actually discovers it was the other members of the band who were the fake, and that Paul was the only original member of the band remaining, which is, it's riveting stuff. And super bizarre, perfectly bizarre.